Ethan stood at the entrance of the massive Vraxian palace, feeling a mix of awe and nervousness. His mission was important. He had been sent by Earth's government to negotiate peace with the Vraxians, a powerful alien race that controlled a large portion of the galaxy. The Vraxians were known for their intelligence, strength, and pride. They rarely interacted with other species, making this moment even more critical for Earth. The tall, smooth towers of the palace loomed above him, casting long shadows across the grand courtyard. Vraxian soldiers moved like shadows, their silvery armor reflecting the faint glow of the twin moons. The air was thick with tension, but Ethan tried to calm himself. He was just a diplomat, after all no different from the many others who had walked these halls before him. As he entered the grand hall, he was immediately struck by the alien architecture. The walls were adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as though alive. He had learned about Vraxian history during his preparation, but seeing it in person was another thing entirely. The history, the culture, the power, all of it weighed heavily on his shoulders. "Welcome, Earth diplomat," a cold voice echoed from the shadows. Ethan turned to see a tall Vraxian figure emerge from the darkness. The soldier's armor was sleek, almost alien in its design. His face was partially covered by a helmet, but his eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. Ethan nodded respectfully. "I'm here to meet Queen Zorath," Ethan said, his voice steady, despite the nerves racing through his veins. The soldier nodded and motioned for him to follow. As they walked down the long hallway, Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of every Vraxian's gaze on him. The hallway led to a large chamber where the queen was waiting. She stood at the center, her back straight, her posture commanding. Her long, dark hair flowed down her back like a waterfall of ink, and her pale blue skin shimmered under the light of the room. Queen Zorath was beautiful in an otherworldly way. She was tall and imposing, her features sharp and regal. Her deep, violet eyes were fixed on Ethan as he entered the room. The room seemed to grow colder as he approached her, and he couldn't help but feel the gravity of the moment. Earth's diplomat. The queen's voice rang out, her tone both commanding and curious. "What brings you to my world?" Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I come in peace. I am here to negotiate a future for our two races, a future of cooperation and understanding." Zorath studied him silently for a moment. "You carry with you something that I have not seen in a long time." Ethan frowned, unsure of what she meant. He glanced down at his uniform, noticing the small symbol on his chest. It was a simple emblem, a design of two intertwined lines forming a circle. It was an ancient symbol from Earth, one that had been used by the first settlers. He hadn't given it much thought when he put the shirt on that morning. The queen's expression shifted. For a brief moment, her eyes widened and her hand trembled slightly. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had seen that look before. And people who recognized something important, something they hadn't expected to find. She stepped forward, her gaze locked onto the symbol on his chest. "Where did you get that symbol?" she demanded, her voice tight with emotion. Ethan was taken aback by the intensity in her voice. I'm not sure. It's just the emblem of Earth's diplomatic corps." Zorath's eyes narrowed, and she took a step back, her expression a mixture of disbelief and awe. "No," she whispered. "That symbol, it cannot be. It cannot be you." Confusion filled Ethan's mind. He took a step closer. "What do you mean, Your Majesty? Is it about this symbol that you recognize?" The queen's gaze softened slightly, but the tension in her body remained. "That symbol," she said slowly, her voice tinged with ancient sorrow, "is not just any mark. It is the mark of the ancients." Ethan blinked. "The mark of the ancients?" Zorath nodded, her eyes never leaving the symbol on his chest. "Yes, it is a symbol. Of great power, of a time long forgotten. A time when humans and Vraxians were true allies, bound by a sacred bond. The symbol marks a chosen one, a human who can restore what was lost." Ethan's mind raced. He had studied Vraxian history, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Restore what? What do you mean?" Zorath took a deep breath and looked away for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost wistful. Many centuries ago, humans and Viraxians forged a powerful alliance. Together, we created something that could change the course of the galaxy. But that alliance was betrayed. The humans who bore that symbol were scattered, and the truth was buried. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. But I'm just a diplomat. I don't know anything about this. I'm just here to talk. Zorith's eyes met his again, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of something other than cold calculation in her gaze. It was fear. Fear of the past. Fear of what was to come. You don't know it yet, but that symbol marks you as something far greater than a diplomat. Ethan. It marks you as the key to an ancient power, one that could save or destroy us all. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He had been sent here to negotiate, to form peace between two worlds. But now, it seemed like he had stepped into something far more dangerous, something that might change the fate of not just Earth and Vrax, but the entire galaxy, and just. As quickly as it had appeared, the Queen turned her back to him, her posture stiff again, the regal mask falling back into place. She walked to her throne and paused, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair. Without a word, she removed her crown and set it down gently on the throne. The action, though subtle, felt like a declaration. This was not just a monarch speaking anymore. This was a leader, a warrior, preparing for something she had long feared. I hope you are ready for what comes next, Ethan, Queen Zorith said, her voice low but resolute. Because we are not just negotiating peace anymore, we are fighting for survival. Ethan stood still as the Queen turned away, the weight of her words sinking in. His mind raced, trying to process everything she had just revealed. The symbol on his shirt, something he thought was just part of his uniform, was far more significant than he could have ever imagined. He had been told that his mission was about peace, to help create a better relationship between Earth and the Vraxians. But now, it felt as if he had been swept into something far larger than just diplomacy. Queen Zoroth moved slowly, almost as if deep in thought. Her long, dark hair swayed with each step, and her pale blue skin glowed faintly under the soft light of the throne room. Ethan couldn't help but notice the elegance in her every movement. Despite the power she exuded, there was a hint of sadness in her eyes, an emotion he hadn't expected from someone so regal. Your Majesty, Ethan said, his voice a little unsure. I don't understand. What is this mark of the ancients? What does it have to do with me? Zorith paused, her fingers lightly brushing the crown that now rested on her throne. For a moment, she seemed lost in her own thoughts, the weight of centuries of history pressing down on her. Finally, she turned to face him again, her expression grave. The mark of the ancients is a symbol that has been passed down for generations. It is said to belong to those chosen to restore what was broken between our people and the humans, she explained softly. Many believe it's nothing more than a myth, a story we tell ourselves to explain the past, but the truth is very real. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. But why was it hidden? Why didn't Earth know about this? Zorith's eyes softened slightly. The humans who once wore the mark were forced into hiding after the Great Betrayal. Betrayal so terrible it nearly destroyed both our species. The symbol was lost to history, and the truth was buried in the sands of time. To us, the symbol became a reminder of a broken promise, an alliance that ended in tragedy. Ethan absorbed her words, but he was still confused. I'm just a diplomat. I don't know anything about this. Why me? The Queen's gaze sharpened. Because you are wearing the mark, Ethan, the symbol found its way back to you. And that means you are the one who must bring our peoples together again. Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't some chosen hero. He was just a man from Earth, trying to do his job. But the weight of her words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. There was no way to turn back now. He had no choice but to continue forward and hope that he could somehow help. Zoroth took a deep breath, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them again, there was a fire in her expression that hadn't been there before. We have enemies, Ethan, not just within our own ranks, but from outside. There are those who wish to see our species fall into darkness. The symbol on your chest is the key to stopping them. Ethan frowned, What enemies? Who would want to destroy the Viraxians? Zorath stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. There are other races in the galaxy, some even more powerful than we are, who see the Viraxians as a threat. They fear our potential, and they have been waiting for the right moment to strike. The symbol on your chest is not just a link to the past, it's a warning. You, Ethan, are the one who will prevent our enemies from taking advantage of our weaknesses. Ethan felt the weight of her words. This was more than just a political negotiation. This was a battle for survival, one he hadn't signed up for. But Zorath's presence was commanding, and he couldn't ignore the urgency in her voice. So, what do I need to do? He asked, his voice steady, despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. Zorath's gaze softened once more. You must help me find the ancient artifact, the one that the symbol points to. It's hidden on our world, lost in the ruins of an old Viraxian city. It is the last piece of the puzzle, the key to unlocking the power we need to defend ourselves. Ethan nodded, determination building inside him. I'll help, but I don't know where to start. Zorath smiled faintly. We will start together. The artifact lies deep within the ruins of an ancient temple, far from the reach of our enemies. It will not be an easy journey, but it is the only path forward. The Queen's words were both a command and a promise. Ethan knew there was no turning back now. He had no idea what awaited him in the ruins, but he couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. The fate of the Viraxian people and, possibly Earth, itself rested on his shoulders. As the two of them made their way out of the throne room, Zorath gave him a quick glance. Be prepared, Ethan. The road ahead will be dangerous. We may face obstacles both from within my people and from outside. Trust no one but me. Ethan's heart raced, but he nodded. I'll be ready. The Queen led him through the palace's many hallways, her steps confident and swift. Ethan followed closely, behind, his mind racing with questions. What exactly was this artifact, and what did it have to do with the Viraxians' survival? The more he thought about it, the more complicated it seemed. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. This was a fight for the future. They reached a small shuttle bay, where a sleek Viraxian ship stood waiting. The ship's design was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, sleek and almost organic in appearance. Its curves and lines flowing like liquid metal. It was clear that the Viraxians were not only technologically advanced, but also had an aesthetic sense that bordered on art. Zorath turned to him, her eyes sharp. This ship will take us to the ruins. Once we arrive, we'll have to move quickly. The longer we stay, the more likely it is that we'll be discovered. Ethan nodded, his mind focused. There was no room for doubt now. The journey ahead would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine, but he was ready. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it. For Earth, for the Viraxians, and for the future they had to protect together. The journey to the ruins was more difficult than Ethan had imagined. The Viraxian ship cut through the galaxy at a speed that left Ethan's senses dizzy, but it didn't make the travel any easier. The inside of the ship was sleek and quiet, the walls glowing softly in the low light. Felt almost alive, the ship's design smooth and flowing like liquid metal. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something dangerous was waiting for them ahead. Queen. Zorath sat across from him, her posture straight and commanding. She was focused, her eyes never leaving the control panel in front of her. Ethan had never seen anyone with such quiet intensity. She had revealed so much to him in the past hours, yet there was still so much more he didn't understand. More he learned about her, the more he realized how little he knew about the galaxy and the creatures within it. Zorath finally spoke, her voice cutting through the silence. We are heading to the ruins of Zorothis, the ancient capital of the Viraxian Empire. It was once the heart of our civilization, but now it lies in ruins. The artifact we seek is hidden there, buried deep within the temple. Ethan listened intently, his thoughts focused on the task ahead. How long will it take to get there? Several hours.
Ow!
But we must be cautious, Zorath replied. The ruins are in a remote location, and many who seek the artifact are not friendly. We will be on our own once we arrive. My people are not the only ones interested in what lies beneath the surface. Ethan nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. It was clear that their journey was not just about finding an artifact. It was about surviving long enough to reach it, as the ship continued its journey. Ethan couldn't help but think about the strange connection he felt to Zorith. She was a powerful queen, a leader of her people, and yet there was something vulnerable in her eyes whenever she spoke of the past. It was a look that haunted him. She had the weight of centuries of history on her shoulders, and Ethan couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. It wasn't just the symbol that connected them anymore. It was something deeper, something unspoken, that linked them together in this moment. "Tell me more about the artifact," Ethan asked, breaking the silence. "Why is it so important?" Zoralth's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it seemed like she was debating whether or not to share more. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "The artifact is more than just a weapon. It's a key, Ethan. A key to an ancient power that has been locked away for millennia. It was created by both our people, humans and Vraxians, during the time of the Great Alliance. The artifact holds the power to unite us once again, to heal the wounds of the past." Ethan leaned forward, intrigued. "But if it's so powerful, why hasn't it been used before?" Yes. Zoralth's expression darkened. "After the Great Betrayal, the artifact was hidden away, locked deep within the ruins of Zorathis. Only those who bear the symbol can unlock its power. But over the years, the knowledge of the artifact's location and purpose was lost. The Viraxians abandoned it, believing it was too dangerous. And now, there are those who wish to use its power for their own gain." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had always known the galaxy was full of danger, but this was something else. It's an ancient power, hidden away for centuries, waiting to be unlocked. In the wrong hands, could easily destroy everything. "We need to find it before they do," Ethan said, his voice steady with determination. Zorith nodded, her eyes locking onto his. "Exactly. I'll..." As the ship continued its journey through the stars, Ethan couldn't help but wonder how far they would have to go to protect this power. Would they succeed in their mission? Would they become another part of the galaxy's forgotten history? Hours passed in silence as the ship's engines hummed softly, and the stars outside seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Ethan tried to rest, but his mind was too full of questions. He had no idea what to expect when they arrived, only that their task was monumental, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. Finally, the ship's sensors beeped, and Zoralth's sharp gaze moved to the control panel. She stood, her movements fluid and graceful. "We are close," she said. "Prepare yourself, Ethan." Ethan rose to his feet, feeling a sense of urgency flood his body. He had no idea what awaited them, but he knew one thing: they couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. The ship descended toward the surface of the planet, and Ethan's heart raced. The landscape below was barren and desolate, with jagged mountains rising sharply from the rocky ground. The ruins of Zorathis were hidden in a valley surrounded by cliffs, their ancient structures barely visible against the backdrop of the darkening sky. It looked like a place forgotten by time, untouched by the rest of the galaxy. As the ship landed, Zorith moved swiftly toward the exit. "Stay close, Ethan," she warned. "The ruins are dangerous. We will need to move quickly." Ethan followed her as they exited the ship and stepped onto the planet's surface. The air was thin, and the wind carried a chill that seemed to seep into his bones. The ruins loomed ahead, their crumbling stone structures casting long shadows across the valley. It felt like walking into a tomb, a place that had been abandoned for far too long. Zorath's eyes scanned the surroundings, her posture alert. "We're not alone," she murmured. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had been so focused on the task at hand that he hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. But now he could feel it too, the presence of something watching them, waiting. "We have to move fast," Zorath said, urgency in her voice. "The artifact is close, but so are our enemies." As they made their way toward the ruins, Ethan's mind raced. "We're close now, closer than ever before," but the danger was real, and he wasn't sure what would happen when they found what they were searching for. All he knew was that the stakes had never been higher. The future of two civilizations rested on their success, and the clock was ticking. The ruins of Zorothus stood silent, like a forgotten memory in the vast landscape. Ethan's boots crunched softly on the dry ground as he followed Queen Zorotha through the ancient city. The wind howled through the empty streets, sending dust swirling into the air. The once grand buildings were now crumbling, their stone facades worn down by centuries of neglect. Despite the beauty of the place, there was an unmistakable sense of abandonment that made Ethan's skin crawl. Zorath moved with purpose, her sharp eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. It was clear she wasn't just worried about the ruins themselves. She was anticipating danger. Ethan couldn't help but feel the same way. The quiet was deafening, and the feeling of being watched never left him. The artifacts they were searching for were hidden deep within the ruins, and both of them knew they had little time before their enemies arrived. "Stay close, Ethan," Zoroth said, her voice low and urgent. "We are entering the temple now. Once we are inside, the artifact should be within reach." Ethan nodded, his gaze never leaving her as they approached a large stone doorway. The archway was covered in intricate carvings, symbols that seemed to shimmer and change as they moved closer. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before. The door looked ancient, older than the Viraxian Empire itself. Zoroth stepped forward and placed her hand on the stone. A soft hum filled the air, and the door slowly began to shift, grinding against the stone floor. Ethan stepped back, watching in awe as the ancient mechanism came to life. The temple was responding to the queen's presence, as if the stones themselves recognized her. Once the door was fully open, Zoroth stepped inside. The air inside was cool and damp, the walls covered in moss and vines that had crept in over the years. The faint light from their ship cast long shadows along the corridor, revealing more carvings on the walls. These carvings were different, more intricate, more detailed. They told stories of battles, alliances, and betrayals, and Ethan could feel the weight of history pressing down on him as they moved deeper into the temple. The deeper they went, the more Ethan felt a sense of unease. There was something alive about this place, something that had been dormant for a long time. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and every step they took seemed to echo through the silence, as though the temple itself was watching them. Zoroth stopped suddenly, her hand raised to signal him to be quiet. Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He strained to listen, but all he could hear was the wind outside and the faint hum of their ship. For a moment he thought he had imagined it, but then he heard it again, a low, almost imperceptible sound like a distant whisper. Zoroth's expression darkened. "We're not alone," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "Who else is here?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. Zoroth's eyes flicked to the shadows around them. "There are others who seek the artifact. They have been tracking us since we landed." The queen moved quickly, her steps light, but purposeful. Ethan followed her, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the temple. It was hard to shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone or something was lurking just out of sight. They reached a large chamber at the heart of the temple. The room was empty, save for a pedestal in the center, upon which sat a glowing orb. The artifact. Ethan could feel its power from across the room, a faint hum in the air that seemed to resonate with something deep inside him. This was it, the key to everything. It's the artifact that would unite the Viraxians and the humans. The artifact that could change the fate of both their species. Zoroth stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the orb. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with awe. The artifact of the ancients. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the orb. It glowed with an ethereal light, its surface smooth and unblemished by time. There was a strange beauty, too, but it was also intimidating. The power it held was undeniable, and for a moment, Ethan wondered if they were making a mistake. If they were unlocking something that shouldn't be disturbed, is it safe? Ethan asked, his voice tense. Zoroth nodded, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. "It should be, but we must be careful. The artifact is meant to be wielded by the Chosen One, the one who bears the mark of the ancients. Ethan's gaze shifted to her, confusion filling his mind. "What do you mean?" Zoroth turned to him, her expression serious. "The artifact's power can only be unlocked by the one who carries the symbol. It will respond to you, Ethan." He stared at her. "For a long moment, you want me to touch it?" Zoroth nodded. "You are the only one who can." Ethan felt a surge of uncertainty wash over him. He had never believed in destiny or fate. He had always been just a man, doing his job. But now it seemed that everything had changed. The symbol, the artifact top, all pointed to him. He was the key to everything, whether he was ready for it or not. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward. His hand hovered over the glowing orb, the warmth of its energy radiating through the air. He didn't know what to expect, but he couldn't turn back now. The moment his fingers brushed against the surface of the orb, a wave of energy shot through him, as if the very fabric of the universe had shifted. The room around him seemed to blur, and for a moment he saw flashes of images of humans and Viraxians, side by side, fighting together, laughing together, creating something beautiful. Then, just as quickly, the images vanished, leaving behind a deep sense of understanding. He pulled his hand back, his heart racing. The orb's glow dimmed, but the air still hummed with power. Ethan could feel that something had changed. He wasn't sure what it meant, but he knew one thing for certain. The artifact had chosen him. "We've done it," Zoroth said, her voice full of wonder. But just as Ethan started to breathe a sigh of relief, a sharp noise echoed through the temple. The sound of footsteps too many to be ignored. Their enemies had arrived. "Get ready," Zoroth said urgently, drawing a weapon from the holster at her side. "We need to leave now." Ethan's heart pounded as he took the artifact from the pedestal. They had what they came for, but the real fight was just beginning. The air in the temple felt thick with tension as Ethan gripped the artifact tightly in his hands. It was surprisingly light for its size, but the energy it radiated made his palms sweat. He could still feel the echoes of the power that had surged through him when he touched it. There was no turning back now. He knew their enemies were close, and if they didn't act fast, everything they had worked for would be lost. Zoroth's sharp gaze scanned the shadows of the temple. The sound of footsteps had grown louder, echoing off the ancient stone walls. The queen's face was set in a grim expression, her fingers twitching at the weapon at her side. Ethan felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had come for the artifact, and now they had to fight to keep it. "We need to move quickly," Zoroth whispered, her voice low but urgent. "There's no time to waste. The artifact must be protected at all costs." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The temple seemed to close in around them, the walls pressing closer with every passing second. He glanced around, trying to spot an escape route. The chamber they were in had only one exit, and it was far across the room. From where they stood, the footsteps were getting closer, and he knew they didn't have much time. "Follow me," Zoroth ordered, her eyes never leaving the shadows. She moved with purpose, her steps silent on the stone floor. Ethan stayed close behind her, his hand clutching the artifact as though it might slip away. Couldn't help but feel like they were walking into a trap, were outnumbered, and their enemies had the advantage of being prepared. He had no idea who they were, but he knew one thing: they would stop at nothing to get their hands on the artifact. As they made their way toward the exit, the sound of the footsteps grew louder, now accompanied by the low murmur of voices. Ethan couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Anger, frustration, and determination. Zoroth reached the door first, her hand outstretched. She stopped just before crossing the threshold, her body tensing as if she were listening for something. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he waited for her next move. Without warning, the door flew open, and several dark figures rushed into the chamber. They were dressed in dark armor, their faces hidden behind helmets, but their presence was imposing. Ethan's heart raced as he realized they were surrounded. Zoroth didn't hesitate. She immediately raised her weapon, firing a shot that echoed through the room. One of the attackers dropped to the ground, but the others advanced quickly. Their weapons drawn, Ethan felt a surge of panic. They were outnumbered, and he had no idea how to fight. He was a diplomat, not a soldier. But then he remembered the artifact in his hands. It was the key to everything. They couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. "Get down," Zoroth shouted. She dove behind a pillar, and Ethan instinctively followed. The enemy fired their weapons, but the blasts missed by inches. The air crackled with energy, the temple's walls shaking with the force of the attacks. Ethan pressed himself against the pillar, his heart thumping in his chest. Zoroth's voice cut through the chaos. "We can't stay here. We need to reach the ship." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the room. The exit was still a long way off, and the attackers were closing in. He could feel the weight of the artifact in his hands, and he knew they had to get out, but he wasn't sure how. He had no training, no experience in combat, but he couldn't let Zoroth down, couldn't fail her. He had to think of something. As another blast shot toward them, Ethan noticed a narrow passageway in the corner of the room, hidden behind a fallen pillar. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. "That way," Ethan shouted, pointing toward the passage. Zoroth looked at him, her eyes sharp with recognition. Without a word, she motioned for him to follow. They sprinted toward the passage, dodging the blasts that came from all sides. The narrow corridor was barely wide enough for both of them, but they kept moving, their footsteps echoing in the tight space. Ethan's lungs burned as they ran. The sound of their pursuers' footsteps closed behind them. They reached a dead end. But Zoroth was already moving, her hands quickly working at a hidden panel on the wall. Ethan looked over his shoulder, watching as the dark figures closed in. They were almost there. With a soft click, the panel opened, revealing a small hidden elevator. Zoroth ushered him inside, and they both stepped in just as the attackers rounded the corner. The door closed with a hiss, and the elevator shot downward. Leaving their enemies behind, Ethan leaned against the wall, his heart still racing. He had no idea where they were going, but he knew it was better than facing the attackers head-on. He looked at Zoroth, who was standing with her arms crossed, her expression thoughtful. "We can't let them follow us," Zoroth said quietly. "The artifact must remain safe." Ethan nodded. "I understand. But how do we stop them? We can't just keep running." Zoroth looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and something else, something softer, but just as intense. "We fight, Ethan. We fight to protect the artifact, and we fight for our people. If we don't, everything we've worked for will be lost." The elevator slowed to a stop, and the doors opened. They stepped into a narrow hallway that led to the ship. Zoroth motioned for him to follow, and they moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they neared the ship, Ethan couldn't help but think about how much had changed since he first arrived on Veraxis. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission had turned into a fight for survival. The artifact, ancient power it held, was more than he could have imagined. Zoroth stopped in front of the ship's hatch, turning to him. "We're not done yet. The real battle is just beginning." Ethan nodded, his eyes set with resolve. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't give up. Not now. Not when the fate of two worlds rested on his shoulders. The silence inside the ship was deafening. Ethan and Queen Zoroth stood at the control panel, their eyes locked on the vast expanse of space outside the windows. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction, the black void between them seemingly infinite. The artifact, still glowing faintly in Ethan's hands, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its power unmistakable. Zoroth's posture was tense, her face expressionless as she glanced at the status screens. Ethan could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had escaped the temple, but the battle was far from over. The attackers were still out there, and they would stop at nothing to take the artifact. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet ship, but it was a question that needed answering. "We need to find a safe place to hide, somewhere far from here," Zoroth replied, voice steady but filled with an underlying urgency. "The artifact is too valuable. If it falls into the wrong hands, it will mean the end for both our species." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words sink in. This wasn't just about peace anymore. This was about survival. He had a part to play in that survival, whether he was ready for it or not. Zoroth's fingers danced across the control panel, and the ship hummed to life. The engines roared as the vessel slowly lifted off from the surface of Vraxis, leaving the ruins behind. They were free for now, but the battle wasn't over. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still lurking just beyond their reach. "I don't know where to go," Ethan admitted, his gaze drifting to the stars. Zoroth paused, her eyes narrowing as she studied the stars outside. "There is a place," she said slowly. "A hidden world known only to a few. It's a dead planet, abandoned by everyone, but it's also the safest place we can go. No one would dare follow us there." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "You're saying we have to go to a place no one knows about?" Zoroth's lips twitched into a brief, grim smile. "Yes, it's our only option if we want to keep the artifact out of enemy hands." Ethan glanced down at the artifact, his grip tightening around it. It had already changed his life. He didn't know what it could do, but he knew it was powerful. And that power could either save or destroy them. "I'll follow you," Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. "Wherever you go, I'll go. But we need to be ready for whatever comes next." Zoroth turned to face him, her expression serious. "You don't know what we're up against, Ethan. There are forces at play here that are far beyond anything you've encountered. You've seen the attackers in the temple. Those are only the beginning. There are others, more dangerous than you can imagine." Ethan swallowed hard. He wasn't naive. He understood the stakes now. The artifact was more than just a relic. It was a weapon, and the enemies they were facing would do anything to control it. Zoroth was right. This was only the beginning of a much larger battle. "I'm not backing down," Ethan said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll protect it." Zoroth's eyes softened, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw a hint of something resembling trust in her gaze. "You've changed, Ethan. You came here as a diplomat, a stranger, but now you are part of this, whether you like it or not." Ethan felt the weight of her words. She was right. He had come to Veraxis to represent Earth, to negotiate peace. But now he was part of something far larger, something that could shape the future of two civilizations. The choices they made would echo through history. The ship's engines roared as they entered hyperspace, the stars stretching into streaks of light as the ship accelerated. Zoroth sat back in her seat, her hands steady on the controls. Vint sat beside her, still gripping the artifact, his thoughts racing. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anyone take this from them. As the ship flew through the endless void, Ethan's mind wandered back to the ruins of Zorothis. The temple had been a place of mystery and power, its walls filled with ancient symbols and hidden secrets. The artifact had been the key to everything, and yet, in some ways, it still felt like they hadn't uncovered the full story. There was so much more to learn, and they were running out of time. "What happens when we get to this hidden planet?" Ethan asked, pulling himself from his thoughts. Zoroth's gaze flickered toward him, her expression unreadable. "Get there, we'll be safe for a time. But the artifact's power won't remain hidden for long. Others will come looking for it. We'll need to find a way to harness its power before that happens." Ethan frowned. "And how do we do that?" "We'll figure it out," Zoroth said, her voice calm but resolute. "We have no choice. The artifact holds the key to our survival. If we can unlock its full potential, we may stand a chance against those who seek to destroy us." Ethan felt a surge of determination. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a hero. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let Zoroth and her people down. They had trusted him, and he would do everything in his power to protect them. The ship hummed as they traveled through hyperspace, the endless stars stretching before them. Ethan thought about what lay ahead, about the battles they would face, the enemies they would fight, but there was something else on his mind. Something that had been growing inside him since he first met Zoroth. The bond between them had grown stronger over time. It wasn't just about the artifact anymore. About their shared goal, their shared survival. Ethan couldn't deny it any longer. He was part of something bigger than himself now. And as long as they were together, they stood a chance. "Do you believe we can win?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet. Zorith turned to him, her eyes filled. With a quiet confidence, we have no choice but to believe Ethan. If we don't, then everything we've fought for will be lost. Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. They were in this together now. And no matter what happened, they would face it side by side. The ship continued to streak through the stars, heading toward the unknown. Whatever awaited them on the hidden planet, Ethan knew that the future of both their worlds depended on the choices they made in the days to come.